Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to you wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another Zoom meeting and podcast of Here's Tom with the Weather, where we investigate the plethora of higher powers that populate the vast universe of recovery, particularly where the founders of AA encourage us to find some kind of higher power as long as it's not us. For example, in the third step of Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program, where it states, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him, and also to the 11th step, where it states, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. We speak to people with all manner of higher powers, from those who are atheists, Sufis, non-dualists, agnostics, Christians, Buddhists, followers of Islam, paganists, and whatever you want. We leave no stone unturned. It's our aim to promote understanding and open-mindedness so that alcoholics and addicts can find a higher power of their own to stay sober and carry the message. And please remember that this is not an AA meeting. It's just some people's version of the truth, whatever that may be. And what we're all about is to encourage tolerance and empassion and help people, empathy, and help people find some sort of tolerance for other people's kind of higher powers and to be open-minded. And as I said, this is not an AA meeting. It's just some people's version of the truth, whatever that may be. And sometimes we speak to seekers, to people not necessarily in recovery, and to gurus. And today, it's my honor to introduce you to Trishna Horkan. How you doing, Trishna?
Hi.
How you doing? Good to see you.
I'm doing well.
Good. Now, I'm just going to give a brief bio, and this is something that I've been sent by Trishna. And it's that Trishna has been a student of healing for 23 years. She has studied with spiritual teachers in India and the USA, including AMRIT-ananda-mayi Ma, Amma, Chief Wanbli Sapa, Tibetan Buddhist Lamas, Dr. Stanley Haleakala Hew Len, many Indigenous Medicine Men, and her Shastriji in India. Her approach, as you will soon find out, is humorous, healing, and empowering. She has an intriguing concept of higher power or higher powers. She's been studying the Divine Mother academically and spiritually since 1988, where, in her own words, when she was 2 years stark raving sober. In 1998, her Shastriji in Rajasthan, unbeknownst to her, initiated her as a clairvoyant. The Lakota, the Native American tribe, have given her the name Looks in the Future Woman. She's also interested in Bill Wilson's psychic journey and beliefs from the AS conference-approved biography, Pass It On, the story of Bill Wilson and how the AA message reached the world. And that's already a pretty impressive introduction there. So Trishna, that's the bio. Give us a little bit of Nate. Can you just give us a quick story, a couple of minutes of your story, your journey through AA and how you came upon your higher power?
Oh, absolutely. And brevity is not my strong suit, so bear with me. So I got sober at 19 and I was raised Catholic. And I don't have a shtick with that anymore. It took me years, and I quit taking the Catholic Church's inventory. And but I always had a connection with Mary. And even though we don't, in the Catholic Church, they say they don't worship Mary. When you're 7, you don't know that, you pray to her. And little did I know that when the patriarchal Christian religions overtook the goddess-centered religions, they let, a lot of the peoples of those cultures to, I'm sorry, it's kind of intense just watching my face the whole time. I'm used to seeing like the Brady Bunch, Hollywood Squares. So
you can, switch to gallery.
We'll take that off. Yeah.
Okay. All right. It's just too intense for me if they want to put it on main speaker. So, but that they just let people transform if they were worshiping Bridget or, whatever their goddess of the hour was. They just let them have Mary. So a lot of times you'll see that like Notre Dame was built over an Isis temple and so on and so forth. So then I college saved me because people drink like alcoholics when they're that age, especially in a university community, whether they are or not. So I threw myself in my studies and I became drawn to what's called women's studies, which was every single discipline, whether it was history, sociology, English, it was focused on women because you could take like an English course on, you know, Aristophanes to the present and not find one woman on the syllabus. So you might have some involuntary celibate that worked at the print shop because we couldn't even have books go, why isn't there a men's studies? And I would say, well, there is, it's called history. So and then what started to happen was we all had to, and it was pretty traumatizing because the more we found out, the worse it was, especially when you got to violence against women. So we started, as we were getting ready to graduate, to be like, okay, what's their solutions? So someone might be going into law, someone might be going into social work, someone might be using art or painting to create awareness. And I just started moving more and more towards us, you know, basically what I learned in recovery. When you have a malady, you need a remedy. So recovery is a spiritual malady, and we need a spiritual remedy. Well, the hate, you know, the oppression of women, the destruction of women, the destruction of the divine, you know, the goddess, was a spiritual malady. So I wanted to focus on that. And that there's, you know, I can give people books afterwards that are pretty academic. Now it's a lot more common. So then, so it was like the personal was political for me. This is so intense to be in a meeting or to be in a group that's associated with AA people and to talk about anything like this. Because I adhere so strongly to we're not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, or institution. So that was my journey. And then afterwards I realized, well, there's no programs or graduate schools I can really go into. I probably could have gone into some kind of theology. And then I just started seeking and pretty soon found myself on the path that I am now. Actually, it's pretty fast after that. But so I don't know if that's, yeah. And then fast forward, so I graduated in 1990, was doing every seminar I could get my hands on, found about a spiritual teacher, Hedekandi Wole Baba, who's not in a body anymore, and they believe he's the incarnation of Lord Shiva. And if you see my background, that's his ashram. And who was still alive was his Shastriji, who was his, which is a word a lot for a Sanskrit scholar, a t-shirt. And he was a pure clairvoyant, and that he didn't have an ego through it, with no filter. And he was an Ayurvedic doctor, Vedic astrologer. And I had a dream where he sent me a fax that said, come to India. And I'm like, how the heck am I going to come to India? I barely can pay my rent. And it's expensive to go to India from the States. And my biological father died of alcoholism. And right after he died, I had a dream where he was taking all around where you see in the back there, that river, which I had never been to before. And then his wife called me and said, she's from New York, your father left you $10,000, but I was afraid you'd go so far to India, but I'm going to let you have it. And I said, oh, thank you. So I used it to go to India and handle my case. So, and Shastriji has written thousands of verses in praise of the Divine Mother. And when I went to his home, I couldn't sleep. And I kept having a dream. I kept being woken up. And I have a dream where we were talking. And then I get woken up and go back in the same dream. If you had that experience where you wake up and you keep going back in the same dream. And we were talking and he was telling me things and I couldn't. So the next morning, when I finally got to see the Trishna Shastriji wants to see you. We had a translator and we came down and they said, you know, Trishna has dreams about you, come to her to meditations. And he said, that's her gift from Bajik and God. Whenever she thinks of me, I'll come help her. And then he said, are you married? And I said, oh, I'm with this guy and I don't know what to do. I don't know if we should get married or not. And he goes, we talked about this last night. I said,
all right.
Yeah, the dream. And I said, I'm so sorry. I don't remember. And he said, he was your husband in your past life. You don't have to marry him. So I broke up with the guy right when I got back. And he put himself in a pancreatitis with his relapse by the time he was 28, and has really, I mean, God love him, but it was saved me a lot of heartache. So, and then I had gone to Lakota Sweat Lodges. I'm very tentative as a white person, to talk about the Native American tradition. I think it's obnoxious. But I will say it took me about 10 years, where it used to be there'd be like one Native American who would lead like the ceremony and all white people. It took me about 10 years for it to reverse, where I was one of the only white people. And it was, I met Chief Fred Leroy Wanbli Sapa. Wanbli Sapa means Black Eagle, and he was the honorary chief chairman, and he restored, which the United States had disbanded, the Ponca tribe of Nebraska. And so he heard I could do readings, and he said, well, let's check her out, because he's very skeptical. And I didn't know who he was. I did a reading for him. If I would have known who he was, I would have been a wreck. And apparently I said enough things, and he'd be like, are you sure you're not Indian? Because it's some of the things I could see. And I'm like, no, my parents and my dad and my grandparents immigrated from Ireland. So then he just said, you have a gift. And then we would go to ceremonies, and I had a lot of remarkable things happen. And I would feel during the ceremonies this twist in my ear, because in the Uwepi ceremonies, the spirits can be very tangible. And I would say, what's going on? He said, they're turning up your volume so you can hear their messages. And when they do a name, and then he said, it's time for a naming ceremony. And when they do a naming ceremony, it's not like the elders get together. They literally do a ceremony. The spirits come in, and then the medicine man will tell you what they said, because the spirits only speak Lakota. And that was when they gave me my name, Tolka Takia Weanka, we looks in the future woman. And he had told me, you're going to have a name probably like your gift. But, you know, like someone else in the ceremony is like 6'7". He got Touch as a Cloud. That was a great warrior. An artist was Dreamcatcher woman. And back to when I met Shastriji, I came back from India, and people started coming to me and saying, I hear you can do readings, because my father who raised me had also died. And I went out of my mind with grief. So I was like, this is unacceptable. I want to talk to him. And I couldn't talk to him, but all these dead people started coming to me. So people found out that dead people could come to me, which Bill Wilson was a medium as well. Right. And when I went back to India, I said, because Shastriji came to me in a dream and said, you think you're doing this on your own? I initiated you. And he confirmed it. And I said, I'm terrified of what I'm seeing. And he said, it'll get better. And I go, I don't like to tell people some things that I see, because you never have to say anything you don't want to. So that's more than a couple minutes, but hopefully I made it a little entertaining and animated, so it wasn't too boring.
Well, that was certainly entertaining and quite amazing. And I think for me, it's that you've taken bits from here and there, and your path hasn't just been subscribed to one particular spiritual path. You've gone from the Indian subcontinent to North America, and you've taken bits and pieces, you know, from here and there, and it's developed you. There's so much I wanted to say, but I guess the big question that we ask everyone, the first up, is bearing in mind, what's God? Who is God? What is God to you? What does that mean? What does that word mean to you?
Well, I still bristle at the word God. For me, it's which is not something I share a lot from the podium. But I just couldn't wrap my head around God the Father. I really got tripped up by God as we understand him. I'm like, seriously? Him? He was more like Don Corleone and the Godfather. So if I had to, it would be God as I understand her, the divine feminine. Okay. And you know, the goddess, the feminine face of God, but it's not incompatible with the idea of Akantaka, to, you know, the great spirit of many faces, source. But I do better, maybe it's my Catholic upbringing, I do better when I can pray to something I can visualize a little bit more than just a sense.
It's interesting. Last week we had Joe C on, he's sort of with an agnostic atheist background, and he was talking about, and I don't want to dwell too much on it, but there's a lot of stuff in AA and the big book and the steps about him, and you know, it's quite a masculine, or it's a man god, I guess, if for want of a better word. Was that something that when you first came in did you have issues with that in terms of the steps and doing?
Absolutely not, because I was like I said, I was raised Catholic, and you know, I graduated from secondary school, high school, I think in Europe, do you call it college? And
Yeah.
and then I, you know, did drugs and drank for a year. I got sober. So it wasn't like I really had time to reject anything. I mean, this wasn't my truth. So it wasn't until more time had passed. And I used to go to this tiny meeting. And when I got asked to read the steps, I would substitute God as I understand her, and because, you know, I'm defiant, right? I wouldn't do that now. But, and there was a gentleman, he was so sweet. And he used to always ask me to read. And I think it was because I did that.
Okay. I'm interested as well that obviously the clairvoyant thing is entirely fascinating. It's hugely fascinating. And you mentioned before about that kind of, I guess the film Sixth Sense comes to mind when we see dead people. Can you tell me what you see? Do you sense? Do you see spirits? How does that work for you? How did that was this something that happened before you got sober and it was progressed after you got sober, or is this something that that's just come on since you started flexing your spiritual muscles?
Being a spiritual gangster.
Yeah.
Well, I have yet to meet an addict alcoholic who's not incredibly psychic. They just might not call it that way. And when I worked in a homeless shelter, we had a treatment center within a homeless shelter, and I worked in that a couple times a week and teaching a couple classes. And I would just ask about it, and I would hear stories. Some of the stories are basic. Man, I knew when I rolled up on that crack house that something was going to go down. then I got busted, you know. But it's also something where we feel on high definition, you know, and that can work against us, right? Well, I had a sponsor that said every defect is an asset. So, you know, we're hypersensitive, but we're also we feel things, everything so strongly. So in that sense, I know I was psychic, but I had experiences where, like when I was 5 and we were looking at houses when we moved to Nebraska, my mom said, you pick the house. I was bored. And then when we came to our house, I'm like, this is our house. This is our house. And there were 2 sinks in the bathroom. And I said that when my grandmother comes, lives at this is the one she's going to use. And 10 years later, she did things like that. But I have yet to meet people that aren't open-minded, but don't tell me their children and grandchildren don't do that. So
Sure.
Then when you're academic, this isn't all that uncommon. You're so in your left brain all the time. You don't use your right brain as much. So there was a period where I didn't read for a year or 2 while I was balancing out. And then Bill Wilson talks about it in Pass It On. There's a whole story I sent you. It's on page 6 or chapter 16 of Pass It On. And it starts on page 275. This is where it says Bill was a clairvoyant. He believed in ESP, et cetera. And there's a whole story about when he was in Nantucket, which is in New England. And he was making breakfast, and these different spirits started coming to him and talking to him. Sea captains and telling him different stuff. And then they went to a museum later on and they found all these names. But Bob and Bill would go to seances, what we would call seances. And that was,
Oh, really?
now, can you imagine now, especially with all the fundamentalists, they go nuts. And so, but I read an article that said, well, it wasn't like they had TV. What, you know, they had to go search for stuff to do. Yeah. And Bob was really churchy, you know, he was, so I was kind of surprised to hear that. So they would go and do that, Bill and Bob and their wives, Lois and Ann. And so that was kind of the way it was for me. It wasn't so startling. But yes, when my father, who raised me and adopted me, when he died, I was like out of my mind with grief. I was 9 years sober. I wanted to blow my head off and join him. I didn't know how to handle that much pain. And that was when I referred to before, like everything I've been learning with metaphysics, new age, new thought, whatever you want to call it, was, you know, like thought is creative. And I went, okay, so I can do anything. So I want him to show up. I want to deal, you know, I want to be with them. And that was when I just started, people would be at my house and I would start seeing people, faint images, which is, Bill Wilson describes it quite well. It's like they're see-through. And I had to shut that down a lot. Obviously I can, otherwise I'd go nuts. Probably the first time it came to me before I knew I could do it was the Vietnam War Memorial in DC. It was really crowded with spirits, and they were waving at me. And I looked at my girlfriend, who's very open. I'm like, did you see that? And she said, yeah, but that was before I kind of knew what I could do.
Right.
But I basically had a baptism by fire. I learned how to do it because people started coming to me hearing that I could.
Wow. That's quite phenomenal. I'm interested. I don't want to dwell too much on it, but I'm interested in the shapes and the figures that you see. I mean, is as the transparent stuff, is that, do you have members of your own family that come, or is it, I mean, again, it's sort of a little bit of an unknown country to me, but how does that manifest, these shapes? Do you actually see faces? Is it transparent? And do they talk to you? Is it, I'm quite interested to know.
Well, that's a really good question. So it depends if someone's made an appointment and they come to me because their child has died, or their husband has died, or their parents have died. And then that, first off, that spirit will decide whom they'll speak through. Some are real chatty. Those are the ones that if they go to one of those famous mediums and there's 700 people in an auditorium, there'll be one of 10 people get the message and they'll talk through it. Most of them are pretty particular about who they'll speak through. Yeah. And they might speak non-verbally. They might show me images. And if they speak a different language, they'll speak in English to me, but they might give me phrases. And I've had people with translators there who started crying because I got enough of it accurate. And my family will come to me more in dreams. Okay. And if you have a dream about someone and you're like, and it was really weird, and we were in this, you know, we were at the mall, and then they're, you know, then that's just a dream where you're processing. My experience has been, if they really come to you, then it's quite clear. And if you say to them, wait, you're dead, they'll go, okay, they'll leave. And so I was like all prepared for when my father was going to come to me. And he came to me 6 months after, and I was like, all right, will you reincarnate through me as a child? Because, you know, I had all this whole list of questions. One time, one of my very best friends who died of cancer, who started out as a client to me, came to me after she died, and I was bawling so hard I barely could breathe, and it was quite challenging. But the last time someone who died, who was a friend of mine, came to me was a couple nights ago. My friend Leo, who I met in AA in 1990, who died of a heart attack, clean and sober. And I always kind of regretted that we used to, it's one of those people that sometimes you talk to a lot, sometimes you wouldn't, but no time has passed. And I had a dream where I hugged him, and then I went, I know I'm not going to see you for a long time. Let me hug you again. And I told him, you look fabulous. You look fabulous. And when I woke up, I'm like, oh, Leo came to like let me say goodbye.
So I guess I'm trying to sort of absorb a question. I'm going to open it up to everyone. So if you've got a question that you'd like to ask, and you put it in chat and send it to Anne or Kaiser or James Lebowski there. If you've got a question, and then we'll put you up to ask a question yourself. But I wanted to ask you, so would it be true then that all our relatives, our friends are around us all the time then? Is that how it works? Is that, and I'm asking, I know these sound like stupid questions, but are all our sort of the people with us all the time? Is that how it works? Is there another,
not at all.
are we in a dimension that we can't see? Is that what it is?
Well, that would, something I didn't talk about in my incredibly long-winded introduction about myself was that I've had the honor and the privilege to meet and work repeatedly with Tibetan Buddhist Lamas and monks who are in exile. So the Lamas have to flee overnight or travel only at night by foot from Tibet, which is China now. And if the Chinese catch anyone from Tibet trying to leave, they shoot them on sight. It was just the Lamas. And they would come to the United States and they would do like tours. Tim's been at one, Tim in Omaha, Nebraska. Other people have, and they did it to share their culture, which is illegal. And also for, very nominal donations, they're able to feed 3,000 monks who are practically would, be starving to death, and as well as refugees. And we would get what's called empowerments. So one would sit through, like they would do a talk about one of the deities and give you maybe a mantra and a visualization, which you could do. And one of them on topic is green Tara, which many people know. And they explained it to us that when green Tara was in a body, was a human, they were kind of like in the patriarchal culture. Oh, this is great. You reached enlightenment. You don't have to come back as a woman anymore. And she said, no, I'm going to keep coming back as a female until all beings are liberated. And so they said, you can call her green Tara, you can call her Kali, you can call her Mother Mira, you can call her Mother Mary. It's, that was, they explained it. But the reason why I'm going on and on about this is they speak very, very succinctly about death, what happens when you die. And they believe in involuntary reincarnation. So no, everyone isn't around you all the time. I wouldn't want to be. When someone I love dies now, I do everything I can with the asking for the monks to pray for them, to do the mantras I know for people to have a good rebirth. And people go, oh, they're with you all the time. I go, God, I hope not. I mean, I hope they don't have to be around me all the time. That being said, the last time I did a reading for someone whose spouse was with them all the time was last week. And he didn't have any desire to go. He was just going to wait for her. And he was around all the time. But they'll come in and out. But sometimes you have to go, is that their soul? Is that their personality? So yes and no. Is that a good way to answer it?
Yeah.
Yes and no?
Yeah, I get that. I was just going to think, though, it'd be terrible to hang around all the time and, like, say, go to a Burger King and not being able to eat the burgers and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm really, sometimes with these ghost tours, I'm like, God, help them move on. He wants to be trapped in some mental asylum, or prison. That would suck. When people I go, ghosts aren't pets. Help them get on. Yeah. But yeah. So that's a very lengthy, long-winded, just because I kind of piss people off when I say what reincarnation isn't voluntary.
Yeah, I guess. So so the soul is in what you see, the soul is a vessel that continually goes through rebirth to learn things. Is that your understanding?
That, yes, until you reach enlightenment. So, and page chapter 16, that's one of the first things they say is that Bill Wilson believed in reincarnation. So I've always threatened to do a topic in an AA meeting on reincarnation because it's in conference approved literature. But I would say that is my truth. I don't think they have to be incompatible with other teachings. Now, I had a boyfriend for a long time who was an atheist, but he wasn't a fundamental atheist. They're a pain in the ass.
Sure.
Fundamental atheists have to tell you they're an atheist as much as fundamentalist Christians have to tell you they believe in Jesus. And they're argumentative and a pain in the ass. He was maybe more like an agnostic. I used to be like, how do you reconcile the fact that I do what I do with your belief system? He said, I don't see you seeing the future, talking to dead people as having anything to do with a supreme being. And, but he, so if he does, sometimes I wonder if it just would happen what you think will happen. So if you believe he kind of goes into nothingness, will that happen? But one of the reasons I love and have such mind-blowing respect for His Holiness the Dalai Lama is he's vowed to reincarnate until every sentient being is liberated.
All right. That's going to take a while.
So out of here so fast if I could be.
Yeah.
Like, that to me is a compassion beyond belief.
Well, you said before, Trishna, about you mentioned that word enlightenment, and I've heard different understandings of that for a long time. And what is enlightenment? What does that mean? I don't really understand exactly. I know, like I said, I've heard so many different understandings of that. What's your comprehension of enlightenment?
Well, nice try. You probably know a lot more about it than I do. I know what you read. So thanks for the humility. Thanks for the
humility.
Tell me what this means. So I don't, you know what? There are many more people that could answer it a lot more qualified than myself. But I would have to say these are people who, they say that we are God. There's no separation, that we're all divine. To me, people that are enlightened know it. They have no concept of separation. They see the connectedness with all of them, and they don't have negative thoughts in their head.
Mm-hmm.
So when I met my spiritual teacher, Amma, AMRIT-ananda-mayi Ma, which means mother of immortal bliss, some people call her the hugging saint. And her devotees believe that she's an incarnation of the goddess, much like Christians believe that Christ is an incarnation of Yahweh.
Oh, yeah.
And it is very intense to meet someone who doesn't have a negative thought in their head.
Yes.
So they don't walk around going, people suck, I'm not good enough, I'm really mad at my mom. They don't have that thought. And it's really intense because they are in pure love. They don't judge you. And I always bawl when I'm with them. That's how I know I'm true. The other thing they don't do is tell you they're God or how smart they are or how great they are. To me, that's how you know when there's a false prophet or a guru when they tell you how awesome they are. They asked His Holiness the Dalai Lama, is it true that you're the Buddha of compassion? And he said, I'm a simple monk. But I believe he is. And they asked Amma, is it true that you're the Devi, the Shakti, Durga, the goddess? And she said, I'm a stupid village girl. So someone who just has oneness, maybe, to me, it's just that you realize there's no separation. And then all of these great, saints from India, if you will, they're all like, oh, you can do this. That's what I'm here for. To teach you the illusion that you have to look outside to yourself. I mean, you know all that. You've read a lot more than I have, actually, with the I am that. And
well, yeah. Well, it's about you, but I'm going to open it up. Thank you. That's there's some good questions coming through, but I'm going to just go to our regular panel. So I'm going to get the Lebowski he's got a question. So James, do you want to come in?
Well, gosh, since you started talking, it's a bunch of stuff's popped up in my head. But the one thing that is kind of stuck, and I guess I can reference this since it's not a typical AA meeting, but 4 years ago when everybody was all high on the idea that Bernie Sanders might win the election, we'd have this big sort of liberal explosion of whatever, I don't know. And then it didn't turn out that way, and then a lot of people were very upset. And I listened to a video, and I can't remember her name, but she was an energy teacher of some kind. And she explained that there's a transition going on now from the masculine to the feminine.
Yeah.
And that the masculine was a necessary energy to get us to a certain point, and you can't transition that quickly from one to the other. So the idea of all of a sudden going from where we were to where I wanted us to, you know, the whole feel the burn movement, that whole thing, that was just like an unrealistic idea to be able to transfer from where we were to where we're, and that it's a much slower process that we're going through, but it's a movement from the masculine to the feminine in our consciousness as a people or a species or whatever you want to call it. Is that something that resonates with you? I guess would be my question.
Oh, that's a really good insight. I always thought the irony of Bernie Sanders, before I knew anything about him, I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Another old white man is supposed to bring us to the age of enlightenment. And then I always thought it was kind of funny that all these people hated a woman for having the audacity to run. I just thought it was talk about, you know, like the Leela, the divine, you know. So the first thing I want to say is like, yes, but what I would correct is I have a friend in the program and I adore him infinity times infinity, but we were talking about something like this, basically bemoaning the state of the world. And he started mansplaining feminism to me. And he started to say, well, it's been like this for the last 2,000 years. Like, you're seriously mansplaining feminism to a feminist, someone who got, you know, a feminist theory degree. And I said, but that's not true. It is so not true that it's always been that sweet. And that's what we've been sold, that it's always been this. So I would more say a return to feminine. And let me tell you, there's a fight. There is a fight. If you think they, you know, if you want to see hate, it is a hate for women. Globally, three-fourths of the world, or 2/3 of the world, it's illegal for women to have an original thought. I mean, like, you know, if you just look at it, it's not like, and, you know, so, but one thing I will say, if we can talk about politics, is Kamala Harris, the first vice president, first female, first person of color, first African-American, first South Asian. Her name, Kamala, she is named after the Hindu goddess Lakshmi. It's an aspect. She's and Devi literally means Devi, literally, if we translate in English, is goddess. So I would tell people the Divine Mother is going to be in the White House on the January 20th.
Thank you.
But what people associate with feminine is dismissed at best, tortured at worst. Emotions, intuition, community, cooperation, what some people would call socialism. Now, I don't want to get political science with socialism, but, you know, thinking of the whole.
Yeah. And I just want to come in there and just say that this is totally apolitical, this group, and I have no opinion on outside issues regarding spirituality. So, you know, there's no prejudice here whatsoever. Whatever political divide, we're part of the divide you're on. Just to make sure that that's clear to everyone here.
Oh, okay. No, and I know some of my friends from that I know from AA here probably might consider themselves more Republican leaning. Mm-hmm. So it has nothing to do with it. But
I was just referencing the period in which this video came out, and it sort of resonated with me that there is some kind of, and I don't mean to mansplain feminism, but there.
No, you didn't. You didn't. No, you didn't.
I love the term. Thank you, though, and but I do like the idea that it's a return, because it does seem like the more you explore a lot of spirituality, the more you see there's a lot of omission. And
Yeah.
it seems like it's always in relative to the feminine. So it's just an interesting, well, they say may be born in interesting times.
Well, I hope I'm not like being combative or disrespectful, David, but His Holiness the Dalai Lama said the world will be saved by the Western woman. And so a lot of the great saints will talk about, now maybe he means men and women that are more in their feminine nature. But Harakan Baba said there will not be peace in the world until women are in positions of leadership and power.
Okay.
But that guy said that could be more symbolic.
Okay. Well, absolutely. So I'm going to let's move on. Thanks very much, James. And I know Anne's the other panel member. Anne, have you got a question?
Yes, thank you, David. And hi. I have been curious about something for decades, and I've never even gotten a hint of an answer. You see, whenever I was stressed, and I can remember this back, it must have been 5, I would always trace the letters MARY on my left hand.
Oh.
And it gave me great peace. Now, you touched on that a bit in your opening, and then you went on to explain a little bit further when you brought in a name that I'm not going to try to butcher, but Mother Mary. And I was wondering if you could just expound on that for me briefly here.
Well, what I love about what you shared, and it may be because your right hand is dominant, but the left is supposed to be more the feminine side. So I even love it more. But to me, it's spiritually abusive when we don't have any concept of a higher power that looks like this. And this can be true for when Jesus was made with blonde hair and blue eyes. But so it feels like it's natural that we would start reaching towards that primal memory of God in our image, so to speak, or vice versa. So, and that to me, and the other thing is that I think is powerful is that with Sanskrit mantras, you can say them on the beach, you'll see people see them, but many times they'll write them over and over and over again. So if we say that Mary is the Mother Mary or the Divine Mother, you are writing the word of God on your hand. That was just, I'm not trying to interpret your spiritual experience. Mm-hmm. That was just something that came to me in addition to what you most likely have already felt. I think it's very sweet.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Anne. And now we've and Jackie O. Jackie, you've got a question.
Hey, Jackie.
It's a Zoom issue. Unmute. Thank you very much, David. Trishna, I loved what you had to say. I was thinking about how when I came in, I was quite young, not quite 19, I was 26, but I was shocked by how male-centered the program appeared. And I guess what's frightening is I've kind of assimilated over the last 20 years and it doesn't feel as shocking anymore, even though I work in the violence against women sector, and that kind of, when I came in, I was horrified by this to wives and to this male-centered, God, and it was all male. And I guess even now, I think, let's be honest, the rooms are far from progressive in many ways. I often, the language that I hear and the rest of it. So I just wondered if you've encountered much misogyny when you talk of a divine mother and whether that's caused many problems for you in the rooms, as it were, or how that's received generally.
Well, most men are afraid to say stuff to me now, but when I was younger, I might just say, gee, I really like to read a lot of books by women. Why do you hate men? They would tell us, why do you hate men? and they would call me a feminazi. And I would be like, oh, I don't know, one of the most mass organized, genocidal positions of power. I don't know why I would be a little bit insulted to have that associated with me. But I had to be educated about patriarchal language before I can be bristled by it, if that makes sense. And there is an article, I believe that was in the Grapevine a million years ago, in which some women were coming together and being, we really need to look at this male language. But getting a group of alcoholics to change anything, Jesus, you can't. But if you look at the more recent 12-step programs, Codependence Anonymous, Gamblers, things like that, they use gender neutral terms. So, and what's interesting, you say to the wives, the woman who had the longest sobriety, the first sober woman in where I live in Omaha, Nebraska, was a woman named Jean Mulry. And I feel like I can say her last name because she used it as well. And so she went on every single 12-step call. She was it. And she went to a meeting. Either Bill Wilson came here or she went somewhere with Bill Wilson, and they wouldn't let her go to the meeting because she was a woman. She had to go to the Al-Anon meeting, and she was pissed. And she sat next to Lois, Bill Wilson's wife. And Lois said to Jean, you seem angry. She goes, I'm really mad at your husband. And Lois goes, I can relate. I can understand. So yeah, women weren't even allowed to go to meetings. And I've had men tell me that who are like AA historians. They're pretty chill about it. But the first trip I took to India, there was an article in an Indian Vogue magazine about Alcoholics Anonymous reaching India. And they said, of course, men and women don't go to the same meetings together.
Yeah.
Do you think we should rewrite the big book then?
No. I think they're doing, that's not, I just feel like thinking it should is a waste of energy. It's been proven that if you keep using masculine pronouns, it affects. There's lots of scientific studies on it. I feel what they're trying to do when they added the personal stories is to update that way. But yeah, it drives me crazy. But I try not to be all like, the goddess and God the mother and everything, because I don't want to hear about Jesus in the Bible. I can't have it both ways.
Thanks very much, Jackie. That's great. That's some real food. That actually is a great follow-on from the discussion we were having last week with Joe in Toronto. So that's awesome. Now, I've just got a couple of questions that have come through. And again, I'm inviting anyone to raise your hand if you want, or send us a message in chat if you've got a question. But I've got a question from Jim McFadden, who's a regular on this. And his question is this. It's a good one, this one, Trishna. His question is that, and this is Jim's words, some spirits come back to visit me and tell me things. Lately, dead AA people have visited and told me that Bill W. has organised a flock of 12-step workers that return to AA members to help and guide them. Has Trishna any similar spirit workers from Bill's dead AA's cadre? I know that there are requirements for workers, but I was wondering, sorry, I just finished this. I was wondering if I am deluded with wishful thoughts.
Oh, can I ask Jim a question even though he's muted himself?
Yeah, go for it. Jim, I'm going to unmute you, Jim. There you go, mate.
So are these members that you knew when, like old timers when they were alive, or both?
People from my area who died come back to me.
So, and what they're saying is there's like spirit helpers that Bill Wilson has gathered that continuously work with.
And they return to their home groups and do service work.
Oh, that's really sweet. That works for me. I know that in Narcotics Anonymous, since this is more loose, Narcotics Anonymous home group I had years ago, we would always leave a space when we closed the circle and hold hands. And we would say it was for the addict that would die that night. But I have seen this, and I had a psychic tell me that when, for example, people die of an overdose or drink themselves together, they still think they're high or drunk. They don't know they're dead, which makes sense if you've been really wasted. So I had a psychic tell me that my biological father, who drank himself to death, that his kind of role was he would help people cross over. But I like to believe that a lot of souls and spirits can be of service, and I can't think of a better way. I think that's really beautiful. I think if they're telling you, Jim, you're God, you don't have, you'll write a book, yeah, you might be delusional. But the fact that you're asking him, is it wishful thinking, makes me think it's not.
Yeah, it's a great question. And Jim's been around for 40 years, Jim, so congratulations on your length of sobriety as well, mate. It's wonderful to have you here, as always, every week through thick and thin. Jane M asks, do you see angels?
So does Jane mean like holy archangels, the angels you see people depict in cards?
I'm not sure, but if you want to just quickly unmute there, Jane, and follow that up, I'll allow you to unmute.
Yes, hi, my name's Jane Ann. Yes, I'm talking about like holy archangels, because I see holy archangels.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell us about the archangels then, and how's that do you have to graduate up to that, or is that something that comes naturally? I mean, from what I know, the archangels are the big kahunas. They're the ones that are sort of in charge of everything. Is that right? So how does that work?
Okay, so I'm a huge NBA fan, basketball, which is only a small percentage of the group will kind of understand. And
I like basketball, so I know what you're talking about.
Awesome. Yeah. So there's frequently famous teams like the Celtics or the Miami Heat. When they have three superstars, the Chicago Bulls, and they'll call them the Big Three. So I think of the holy archangels. Melissa, so glad you're here. I just got to see a really good friend of mine that popped in, and so who I haven't seen in person since way before COVID. So it's Holy Archangel Michael, Holy Archangel Gabriel, and Holy Archangel Raphael is more in the Judeo-Christian. Now others will throw in like Ariel. From my experience, there are many people that are way more fluent in this. If you look in a lot of spiritual traditions, you will find these very high beings. And I found that people are more drawn to one than the other. But I feel if it wasn't for Holy Archangel Michael, who's known as being the protector, I would be dead. I would have been sexually assaulted more than I was, gang raped, killed people when I was drunk. I could go on and on and on. On and on and on, yeah.
Okay. Well,
it's something they'll often come to there. I feel like they don't have a physical form, but they will come in a way that doesn't freak you out. So they might come as a human form.
Okay, so I mean, again, this is a naive thing, and I'm not. I know a little bit about archangels and stuff, but so are these we're talking about the geezers with wings, and these are they can sort of have a domain. They have a domain over our earthly presence, or is it a manifestation? Is that just some sort of Christian thing that I've inherited, some sort of image?
I don't really know how to answer that. I think it's okay that was the best way for people to grasp it. And maybe that's how they revealed themselves to the seers with wings.
Oh, okay.
People knew. But like, you remember all the pictures of the halos?
Yes.
Well, when you go to Hinduism, that's just the aura.
Oh, okay.
So I feel that they took on, like, how do you grasp pure light, pure energy? Like Gabriel's the messenger. I absolutely believe that high beings, ascended masters, such as help channel the big book. And guess what? So did the founders.
Wow.
They absolutely drew on Native American spirituality. And I heard a Native American old timer. So in 2000, he had over 50 some odd years. And he was told that by Bill Wilson.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess that's kind of a bad segue.
No, it's fascinating. It is fascinating, and this is kind of the reason why we set this meeting up, is that we could talk about these things and discuss it like this. And I think it's very, very fascinating. And there are a lot of people with a lot of information and a lot of knowledge about AA in the early days, and it's something that I particularly I'm interested in learning. I'm going to ask Kaiser, who's another panelist here. Kaiser, you've got a question.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kaiser. I'm an alcoholic. I got a real quick question for you. In our society, the only requirement, in AA society, the only requirement is to stop drinking, and that opens it up to everybody, which is fantastic. And with that, there's a lot of people that could be fundamental Christian, or fundamental even atheist. And then a lot of people that aren't fundamental or whatever. You seem to me, in my perspective, to have some really clear, specific guiding intuitions with your spirituality. And I'd love to have your perspective on how do you hold your certainty amongst allowing other people to have different conceptions to their higher power. I have my way of using that, but I would love to understand if that's helpful for you, or if you have some guidance in that.
Oh God, that's a great question.
Yeah,
well, when I got sober, and I'm sure other people, I don't know what it's like in other parts of the world, but you better not talk about the Bible. You better not talk about a spiritual practice. You better not talk about your religion. They tell you to shut up right in the middle of the meeting, and which was awesome. So then all of a sudden everybody started, quoting. And I always say, I'm sure if I lived in other parts of the world, it would, maybe if I got sober in an Islamic country, they would do the same thing. But all of a sudden everybody started violating the traditions. Sorry, that's what they were doing. And talking about, sex. And my sponsor was like, well, society right now is becoming more influenced by fundamentalism. So then AA is as well. And then I was at a 12 by 12 meeting. These people were talking, these guys started kind of talking about Jesus. It was more men. And Jimmy Z, I love Jimmy. Tim knows who he is. And Jimmy is an old timer. And I kind of flipped out when I talked to him. I was like, I don't understand what you're talking about. And Jimmy, he was one of the founders group. He's got 1 million years sobriety. And he went, I don't know what the hell we're talking about anymore. And so I got my higher power, you got your higher power, in the story. So then he held my hand at the end of the meeting and he goes, oh, honey, I'm sorry. And I don't mind if he calls me honey. He's like my father. And he said, and I said, no, you healed me on the spot. And he goes, he used to not be like this. So for me, it all comes down to, anyone who's been in a meeting with me knows I speak in very generic ways. And so I don't feel like there's priests in my home group, and they don't seem the need to yammer on about it. But it all comes down to, how secure am I in myself? So if I'm insecure, then I got to convert you. I got to get you to believe, because ultimately I want your permission for me to be cool. But if I'm cool in what I believe, I don't care. But like I said, now that I'm older, people are like, what do you, I remember the first time it goes, what do you think when someone calls you satanic? And I go, I haven't been called that before until I was. And so, and I did have a woman who quit having me as her sponsor, a newcomer, because of my spiritual belief system. Now, the fact that she'd just gotten out of the pen for Grand Theft Auto, maybe she wasn't the most, maybe she shouldn't have been the one to judge. But I tend to be, you know, the island of misfit toys. I tend to be, people can kind of pick up on it. And when we close the meeting, if I go to a meeting with the Lord's Prayer, I don't say it, but I don't make this big showing of it. And I'll have people come to me. So I gather kind of the island of the misfit toys. I gather people who feel like their way is different as sponsees a lot of times.
Great. Hey, that's a great.
I don't know if I answered it. Did I answer it, Kaiser? If I didn't, I'm sorry.
No, you did. You did. It's a just juxtaposition between tolerance and intolerance and allowing. You did a great job. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, and I'm incredibly intolerant, and it's one of my most horrible defects of character. I mean, I judge people for being judgmental. That's a rare skill. So, I think that's some good stuff there.
Well, I just judged you for being judgmental. How's that? Yeah.
Judge me for being judgmental.
Yeah. Guilty. So listen, let's move on. We've got a few more questions to go. Donna Barney in Chicago, you've got a question.
Hello, thank you for doing this, you guys. Thank you so much for sharing. My name is Donna. I'm an alcoholic. I'm Native American. I'm, the other part of the White House is Joe Biden is a devout Catholic, and they pray to Mother Mary, so that's also feminine energy. But my question is, did you know that Bill and Lois were with the Swedish Borg Church and had a spirit room in their house forever? And they did seances frequently and other spiritist stuff constantly. It's very well known, easily documented. If you want to check it out, at Stepping Stones in New York.
Yes, I talked about that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's documented in Pass It On. In chapter 16, and so yes, I did know that. And also, but I didn't know that for probably 7 or 8 years. And I was at a non-AA retreat, and there was a couple women there that I found out in their program, and they're like, Bill Wilson was psychic. He was a medium.
Yeah. Totally. Also, he did sponsor women. We got in on Bill. And Florence Rankin, the first woman in the big book, otherwise it would be called 100 Men, all that stuff. I mean, and Marty Mann, and helping Sylvia Kaufman when she set up with Earl in Chicago after a horrible time in Akron. Dr. Bob would not deal with women, even in 39. It's in Dr. Bob and the Good Old Timers, you guys, page 180. So that's Dr. Bob. I think that was a local person that blocked that meeting on your friend. I don't think it was Bill. I really appreciate you all today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Donna. Thanks, Donna. And just coming in on that is, don't take Donna's word for it or Trishna's word for it. Go and look it up yourself, because this is, if you want to find out the truth, and research it and get a couple of different sources and look at the books, and that's what I would suggest. So don't take everything that we're saying that's said here, because these are the opinions of basically members of AA or NA or whatever you're in. So this is not. So go and look for yourself for the sources of this information. Just don't take it at our word. Go and have a look at it. And I think everyone here would probably agree with that. Would you say that, Trishna?
No, I'm an absolute spiritual authority on everything. Oh yeah. My God. If it doesn't feel right what I say, then please disregard it. It means it's my ego. Yeah. And that was why I said, the GSO, conference approved literature, authorized biography of Bill Wilson. This is where I got this story, chapter 16, So, because, that, like, here's and I sent you screenshots of Rick. Yes. Yeah. And Rick in Toronto has a copy of it right there.
Yeah. And he's a good lad, is Rick.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We know only a little in every area of our life.
Yeah. So, got Stephen in Scotland. Stephen, do you want to come in, mate? I've asked you to unmute. There you go.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, all good.
Well, that's good. speaker. My name is Stephen. Thanks very much. I seen it advertised, this meeting. I said, look, I'm open-minded. Oh, I might as well come and listen and learn. So it was very interesting, and your guest speakers as well for helping me out. Spirituality. I was sitting at a meeting in Irvine in eastern Scotland. There's a Irvine in America. And I said to myself, honestly, Stephen, speaking to myself, what does God mean to me? So I took on the 6 or 7 minutes thinking, you know, the wee sayings and that. Then some come over with a spiritual feeling, a spiritual answer. G for God, obviously, and O opposes, and D demons, demon ring. I said, good sake, where did that come from? So I believe that was a spiritual awakening. And if you don't believe, I write wee notes down, you know, in my mind. If you don't believe there's anything after death, it's spirituality. Spirituality just now, I was talking to spirits, you believe your parents are within you and round about you. If you don't believe there's anything after death, that's okay. If you believe there is something after death and it's proven there is, what's having to gain? For the believer, if there's no anything, that's it, they haven't lost time, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Stephen, mate, have you got a question?
Yes.
Yeah. You want to ask it?
I think Stephen was doing a share, right?
Yeah, no, Stephen's just a Q&A, mate. So if you got a question for Trishna, that'd be great.
That's a bit spirituality.
No, just a question for Trishna, what we've been speaking about so far, mate.
It's okay.
That's okay. Do you want to talk about that, Trishna?
It's about spiritual awakenings?
Yeah. It's okay. Listen, because we're running out, we're sort of getting running out a bit of time here. So I know Mike Stacey, who comes here regularly. He's got a question that I'd like to ask. I think, would you consider the psychic awareness that you speak of as perhaps the same as the intuitive thought that is referred to in the big book?
Absolutely. There's a gentleman in AA, Dan H., who actually died of COVID a couple months ago. And Dan from the Miller Club, for those of you in the area. And he came up, he must have heard about what I did. And he came up to me and asked me, you know, at a meeting when there's people milling everywhere and going back and forth. So what do you do? And I said, you know that promise we intuitively knew how to handle situations that used to baffle us? I have that like times 100. So in that sense, but we're all intuitive. And I think we can get real. And the big book is really clear about, it talks kind of at length about how you know when it's your ego and your own shtick and when it's kind of divinely, and how we can go off in these really grandiose justifications. Okay. So I don't know if I answered. Did I answer it? I don't know.
I think you did a pretty damn good job. Thank you very much for that. So we're sort of into the final straight here. So I know we're going to go to Neil B, and then I think Lebowski, and then I'd like to ask Donal if he wants to come in as well. But Neil, do you want to ask your question there? Good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you very much, buddy. You know what, you leading the crowd here very well. I'm really interested in your questions. You do such a great job. Anyway, my straightforward question is, because I have experiences to ask Trish, is has she had or been through, it's tough to kind of put the right words, a strong religious conversion?
Wow.
Oh, Jesus, that's intense.
Simple question for you there, Trishna.
Yes. You know how people will say in the program, oh, I didn't have the burning bush, or, you know, like Bill Wilson had. I'll say, well, I did. I've had several. I just can't maintain them. So I might say spirit, you know, yeah, I've had mind-blowing, threw up every day for a year trying to process it. Spiritual awakenings.
Wow.
And I'm so jacked up that I have to keep having over and over again.
Oh, lovely. So Lebowski, James, do you want to? I know you've got a couple of questions you'd really ask. You said to me that you've got something really.
Yeah, I went down a rabbit hole. I apologize. I did have a concise question, and that was I've looked for more information on this, but I've only heard this from one person before, but it was a very credible person, that toward the end of Bill Wilson's life, he was shown TM and that he loved it.
Oh.
And he was excited about it. And then, he had passed away shortly thereafter. But I often wondered what AA would look like today if he had become a practitioner of TM. And I didn't know if you knew anything about that.
I didn't. One thing I will say is it was strongly suggested to me when I was 7 years sober. No, it was in a real traditional way. I really benefited from meditation. Maybe you should do this. And by God, I did start meditating at about 25 years sober. And because I thought that was the optional step, and when people say, well, I can't meditate, well, I couldn't quit drinking. So, and then this old timer in Tanya Muhammad said that it was selfish to talk to God but not listen. And then I hear people, I can't stop my mind. Well, nowhere does it say in transcendental meditation or in any of the literature that you have to stop your mind. So I hope that that's true. And I feel that if you really want to just kind of mess with people, bring up meditation as a topic. People get really defensive. Well, I've been sober 25 years and I've never meditated, and so I can't do it. I can't stop my mind, So, but it would make sense to me because they did make a lot of references to everything that they gathered. And he was a seeker, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I hope it's true.
Mm-hmm. Thanks very much. And just to say that is somebody's mentioned that in this particular meeting doesn't mean it's gospel. That's the wrong choice of words, obviously. But
that's great.
Go and research it. Go and look it up. Don't just use the internet. Go and find out in books. And nobody will ever know because you weren't there. So that don't let that be some sort of wildfire that goes through AA that he did TM. That's not necessarily the case because we don't know that that's a fact. So I just want to be really clear about that. This is just one member's hearsay at the moment, with respect to everyone. So thank you very much. James, you got anything else you want to add up to that? Any other controversial thing you want to bring up?
No, I just feel like there should be a disclaimer every time I open my mouth.
That's it. Yeah. You want to look? You had that rumor about him going to a mosque. Do you want to bring that up as well?
No, but I heard he loved TM.
Yeah, great.
So there you go.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask Donald. Donald's always got something. He always waits till after a meeting. This week, I'm going to ask him before the end of the meeting if he's got anything he wants to say, because it's always good. Hello, Donald.
How are you? And thanks, David, and thanks, Trishna. And it was lovely. There was a few things that as you went through, I found myself listing a whole load of stuff. You know what I mean? And going to Mother Mira and Mother Amma. You know what I mean? I still go Mother Mira and Mother Amma, Mother Mira for Darshan, Mother Amma for the hug, and reinforce the fact that I have to surrender, and because I get a spiritual lift in that environment. I found at one stage I went to Bede Griffith's ashram down in Kurisamala. To explore the divine feminine and whatever, and because I know that when I'm trying to write from a place of merely channeling, that it's both male and female, because I can't abide with the word him in the big book and in in the steps as they're written, and I get pissed off with it, you know what I mean? Because I don't sexualize any divinity.
Yeah.
Because I know that there is love that's available in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know what I mean, is an energy. And when I don't believe in that energy, I feel that energy.
Yeah.
It has to be experiential for me. Otherwise, it's fucking useless. Sorry, I didn't mean to swear, but love Bridget. You mentioned Bridget in the early days, the old pagan Bridget. God love her. You know what I mean? When she crossed in with Christianity and paganism and whatever in early Irish mythology. That I mean, I celebrate that on Bridget's Day. And there was a question I wanted to ask yourself now, and you still go to meetings in the same way as I do. Yeah. I go to meetings regularly, just as an ordinary Joe, you know what I mean? Because I put my hands up, I need help on a daily basis, and I have to have it at that level. But I get it from the members of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not from any, you know what I mean? There's angels, there's everything else, and there's Uriel. I have a whole lot of these. And there's so many different things that I've kind of gone through with, and I still sing arty.
Yeah.
And in singing arty, you know what I mean? You are my father, my mother, my all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And this, the Lord that I have is my all. You know what I mean? It's every fucking thing. You know what I mean? And it's the whole shebang. Nothing short of, you know? And at that level, you know what I mean? It's beyond the concepts. I have to have that energy that's beyond concept. It's real, that I can feel. And when I'm at meetings, if someone is sharing at a day-to-day meeting, I close my eyes and I look at the aura. You know what I mean? I'll open just slightly, and I scan the auras in the room. And those that with that bright aura, you know what I mean, that shines, I listen more intensely. When there's a darkness, I say, God love him. You know what I mean? I pray for him.
Thanks, Donald.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like crying when you shared. And I've had Mother Mira's darshan, and I love what you said about surrender. And I feel that Alcoholics Anonymous really prepared me for the path of the Guru. And people get all freaked out about that, you know, G-U-R-U, you know, or the Sadhguru. In that, I'm a sponsor stalker. I was never someone who had trouble calling their sponsor. It was before texting and whatnot, and even when answering machines weren't all that common. But I may have a strong rebuttal if my first amazing sponsor, psychic goddess worshiper of the first 15 years, she may rebuttal this, that I did my best to take her direction. So I felt like I was prepared when I would meet some of these incredibly, you know, spiritual beings. And sometimes you can ask them questions. To not ask anything without clarity on it and without being willing to take action on it if they advised it. And I feel probably my biggest challenge has been with COVID. Besides an absolute disgust in humanity for the first time in my life, is God, man, that's brutal. And is this the first time in ever, like since I'm 90, that I haven't been able to do my community spiritual practices, whether that's go to an ashram or, you know, go to ceremony. And my birth name is Patricia. I grew up as Trish. And when I went to meet my spiritual teacher, Muni Raji, they said, you can ask him some questions. You can ask him what your name is. And they said, he'll look at all your past lives, all your future lives, and he'll usually pick a name that has to do with that, you know, your soul. So he said that my name is Trishna. I burst into tears. And no, I didn't burst into tears. Went into resistance. And it means craving, desire. So you'll see like condoms called Trishna, like in India, or restaurants. It can be kind of skanky. But it means you can either crave, long, be, for alcohol, drugs, sex, relationships. But ultimately it means longing for God, longing for the divine. And I finally feel like I reached a place in my recovery where, like, that's my biggest fear, is having that taken away. Like, I can feel myself. I feel like sometimes I'll be eating a bunch of sugar because I'm really missing Amma.
Okay.
Where it used to be, I'm obsessed about a guy all the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my higher powers were men for years.
Oh, right. Well, listen, we're almost out of time. I'm going to ask the last question. And then just to tell you that on next Friday, we've got, I think it's Tai C, who does hermetics. And that's going to be fascinating. That's more sort of along the angel side of thing. Again, so I'll have to brush up on my angel knowledge because I have very little of it, but I'm sure it's going to be fun. So please come and see us again, same time next week on Friday. And so, Trishna, the question is this. Using your huge psychic ability, you found all the winning numbers for next week's lottery and you become super rich overnight.
I know, wouldn't that be great? And I remember when I was little, I used to be like, this is so stupid. Why don't these psychics just figure out the lottery?
Yeah. Well, it's just a fun question. So you've got the numbers, you've won the lottery, you buy a massive yacht. You go around the world on a massive cruise. You've got your super yacht. You've got all the wealth beyond dream. But off the coast of Fiji, you strike some rocks and the boat starts sinking. All you've got time is to grab a plastic bag and a book that you've got from your favorite bookshelf on this super yacht. You put the book in the bag, dive in, and then you swim across to a deserted island and you wait rescue and you get through. But you've got this one book to read. What's the book? Who's it by? And why?
Well, I'm supposed to say Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, but I'm not.
No.
I would say that, you know what, I'm sorry. I just love what Donald said about using his second sight in meetings. Is it okay if I just say that?
Yeah, sure.
I just love that. I'm so sorry, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I call it like looking at someone's higher self, and I've had people that just bug the shit out of me in meetings. And then I've tried to use my second sense and been like, what is really going on? And then I feel like when I figure out what's going on with them, like maybe when they're a lot of fear or whatever, I can help, be. And then sometimes, I see people, once in a blue moon, you'll see someone who's soulless and it'll freak you out. They're usually like literally straight up a psychopath. So, Daughters of the Goddess by Linda Johnson, Johnse as an Erican. It is a book about all these great saints in India and about the Divine Mother. Okay.
So we'll put that in chat afterwards. And I think James Lebowski actually did say, are there any books that you recommend for your meditation and stuff? Is there anything that you've used that you've found of a great benefit for yourself?
Oh, God, don't get me started. I'm a reader. So I feel, especially for alcoholics and addicts and people that want to dance to it, Thich Nhat Hanh, he's written 80 books. THICH space NAHT space HAHN. He's a Zen master. Dr. Martin Luther King nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. And he, you know how mindfulness meditation is really like in vogue now. He was, doing it. He was kind of one of the founders of bringing that to the Western world. So that's like the real breathing in, I'm breathing in, breathing out, I'm breathing out. And so like if I get asked to do a meditation like in a men's halfway house where people are like maybe 60, 90 days clean, they're also, most of them are incarcerated, so closing their eyes is not safe for them. Then I'll I'll teach something like that. I recommend that. Anything by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I love, if you're drawn to any of the East Indian great spiritual teachers, I love reading about their devotees. Well, actually, David recommended a good book to me because then you can read about it from their perspective and what they go through. As far as anything by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, also, and as far as Native American literature, there isn't. That's a lot of the time. What I've been told by my Native American family is that a lot of time that those are people that have no business writing that stuff. So that I wouldn't be able to say, although, and the other thing, as far as real academic, When God Was a Woman by Merlin Stone, it's one of the first books on feminist theology. Mary Daly, Beyond God the Father. Alice Walker, who wrote The Color Purple, wrote a sequel called Temple of My Familiar, but it's very goddess based. It was probably one of the biggest spiritual awakenings I have reading it. Starhawk, Spiral Dance. So this is like old school. Yeah. Barbara Walker. This is where she like kind of what Donna was talking about. This is, she's like, oh yeah, you know that Friday the 13th that they said is bad luck? No, it's not. The monk said it was because 13 was a number sacred to the goddess. So they would just bastardize anything associated with women. No, not really.
Wow. Well, listen, you've been fantastic. So thank you very, very much. So I'm going to switch off the recording now. So see you next Friday, everyone. Thank you very much to all the panel members. Thanks to Anne, to James, and to Kaiser in the background. And thank you all for coming along here today on Zoom. And this podcast will be available on iTunes and Spotify probably from tomorrow when Lebowski gets his act together. Thank you very much, everyone. And I'm going to finish it off. Thank you very much.